Hi there, my name is Maeve, and today I'm going to be talking to you about hedgerows or hedges and the important job that they do providing a feast or a banquet of food to wildlife throughout the year. Let's start by explaining what we are talking about when we talk about hedges. Well, today we're going to be talking mostly about our older, well-established hedges in Ireland. These are the ones that we see all over the countryside, most of which have been there for a few hundred years. Hedges normally are made up of a long line of plants, including lots of different types of trees. Usually hedges have trees planted fairly close to each other in a row, with some smaller plants, including shrubs and kind of climbing plants mixed in with it. And if we look really closely also at the bottom of the hedges, we're likely to find some smaller plants again that grow on the ground beside these taller plants. So where do we find hedges? Well, hedges usually run in a line along the edge of somebody's land. So for example, the edge of a farmer's field or along the road edge, or perhaps you have one running along the edge of your school grounds or around the edge of your garden at home. And once we travel outside of any towns or cities, you'll normally see hedges all along the countryside, dividing up the fields and along nearly every single country road. Okay, so what exactly is in a hedge? Well, the simple answer to this is that in Ireland we have lots and lots of different types of plants that grow in and around hedges. Let's start with the tallest plants, the trees. We would often find holly, hazel, oak, ash, hawthorn, and then others such as blackthorn, sycamore, beech, amongst many more. If we look at the lower layers of the shrubs and the climbers that grow through the hedges and down towards the bottom of the hedges, we'll see lots of other plants. And these might include elder, vetch, dogrose, bramble, ivy, and honeysuckle, again amongst many others. And then if we look down again onto the very bottom layer, the ground layer, we would see lots of other different species. And it kind of depends on what time of year you're looking, because when they're in flower, we see them much more easily. And these might include plants such as cow parsley, dandelion, meadowsweet, bluebells, lesser celandine, and primrose. You might spot plenty of others, as I say, depending on what time of year. So why are hedges important for nature? So from the list of trees and plants and flowers that we've already looked at, you can hear that we have a great mix of plant life in and around a hedge. And that is what makes hedges so important for wildlife, especially since we have so few woodlands left and forests left in Ireland that have native trees in them. Only about 2% of the land in Ireland is covered in native trees. So the importance of the hedges, which contain lots of lovely trees that have been living in Ireland for a long time, that's why hedges are really important. One of the main reasons they're so important for wildlife is that wildlife use them to hide. So when you have tall trees and dense shrubs and thorny brambles along the lower layers, you can imagine that there's lots of little nooks and crannies and hiding places and spaces for insects and small birds such as wrens and robins and maybe even blackbirds, and then some small mammals like mice and shrews, and even bats love a good hedge. And they use it to find cover so that they can live their life undercover without being seen or chased by some of the bigger animals, the predators that might want to eat them for their dinner. So that's kind of one of the really important reasons hedges look after our wildlife. So hedges provide a safe, sheltered space for foraging, that means looking for food, and for nesting for birds, and for roosting, and for hibernating for lots of different species. So in addition to this, then, the abundance of food that hedges provides to wild animals is just really, really great. Many of the trees, shrubs, climbing plants, and the ground level flowering plants that we looked at earlier produce beautiful flowers that contain lots of yummy nectar for bees and butterflies and other insects to feed on all throughout the spring and summer. And some even have it later in the year. So honeybees, bumblebees, All other bees called solitary bees, butterflies, moths, and many, many other insects would visit the different flowers in the hedges to drink the nectar and to collect pollen. So these flowers are really important for providing food to lots of different insects, as I said, such as bumblebees and moths and flies and bees. And that food is the nectar and pollen found inside each flower. In return for this nectar and pollen food, these insects are also helping the plants to make seeds, which will go on to make baby plants. And they do this by moving the pollen from one flower to the next flower. So when a butterfly or a bee, such as the ones you see in these pictures, when they visit a flower, it is mainly to drink the sweet tasting nectar hidden in the center of the flower. Whilst doing this, then they're also sometimes accidentally and sometimes on purpose, they will carry some of the pollen away. It'll get stuck on their bodies. And when the little bumbling bee or butterfly arrives to the next flower, some of the pollen from the first flower will accidentally fall off. And when a flower receives or gets pollen from a different flower, from the previous flower of the same species, in this way, it will then become fertilized. And that means that the new pollen helps the flower to make seeds. And these will go on then to be the seeds which will make the children, the baby plants of the flowers. So this is a really great knock-on effect then you see as well, because when the plants are growing these seeds, they often surround the seeds with a delicious berry or fruit or something like that. And these fruits then that are produced in great numbers provide a different kind of a feast or a different kind of a banquet for different animals later on in the year. So let's look at bramble. I'm sure many of you have had a feast yourselves of bramble this year over the last few weeks. So the bramble bush flowers, which you see on the left, will turn into blackberries, and the blackberries have seeds hidden inside them in the middle of the fruit. As you probably know, blackberries are pretty delicious snacks, and not just for us, but also for lots of different wildlife like birds, mice, and even foxes. Now here's a tough question for you. Why do you think plants would spend so much time and energy producing beautiful flowers, nectar, and fruit? Why would they do that for different animals? Why would they provide all that fruit for different animals? Well, the answer lies in how nature works. See, everything in nature is connected, and that's really important to understand. And the connection is this. The animals that feed on the fruit actually in turn do a really helpful job for the plants. They eat the fruit, remember that the seeds are hidden inside in the fruit, and then they walk, climb, or they fly away somewhere to other parts of the countryside. And at some point, just like you and I, they will need to do a little poop. And lo and behold, when they do the little poop, out pops all the seeds onto the ground, far away from the parent plant. And this means that the seeds, they're not hiding in the shadow of their parent plant. They've been carried away into the sunlight on the ground somewhere. And the seeds have a really great chance to go on and grow into some baby plants. And that is exactly what the parent plant wanted to happen. Isn't that just amazing? Nature is so clever. So then we'll move on to apples. So another example is the crabapple tree. So that's a native tree here to Ireland. And this has lived in Ireland for a long time and is found in lots of our hedges. It has beautiful flowers or blossoms that once they're pollinated, they turn into crabapple fruit. And like an apple that you might buy in the shop, the crabapple seeds are hidden in the center. And then animals like blackbirds and other birds, and rats and foxes and other creatures will feed on these apples when they've fallen from the trees usually. And now, what do you think might happen to the seeds? Well, that's right. It's the same as the blackberries. They end up in the animal's bellies, and then the animal scurries off or runs away or flies off. And after a little while, they need to poop. And voila, out pops the seeds again. And so the crabapple tree has successfully spread its seeds all around the countryside close by. So these children plants, these baby apple trees will grow and they'll live nearby in the countryside. Isn't that amazing? So then the last example we'll look at is the dandelion. And again, you know that the dandelion is a really common plant, and you probably have it in your school grounds, or you probably see it on your way to school, or maybe you have it close to home as well. And maybe all summer you were blowing the dandelion clocks. They're kind of hidden behind my picture here. There, the dandelion clocks. So this is another really interesting flower that you'd often find at the bottom, the ground layer of the hedge. Now, dandelion flowers produce the food, and really, really important food, the nectar for the bees. And because they kind of flower pretty early in the spring, they're a really helpful way for the bees to get lots of energy early on when there's not much other food available. So once the flowers are pollinated by a bee or a fly, the flowers themselves turn into what we call the dandelion clocks. And the seeds in those are a favorite food of birds, such as sparrows and finches. But in this example, however, the dandelion seeds are designed actually and built to travel far away on the wind. So they don't really need the birds to carry them away. The birds just eat them up. But as they do, they probably ruffle off the rest of the seeds from each clock, and the seeds can take flight. But the birds and mice feed on the dandelion clock. And because there's so many dandelions and they produce so many seeds, this flower is really important for lots of our wildlife in and around the hedges. So if you see dandelions growing along the verge beside a hedge, don't mow them, let them grow. And we'll have lots of other wildlife in the area as a result. Okay, so you can see from what we've looked at today that the plants that make up a hedge play a really great role in our countryside for keeping our animals safe when they're hiding in the hedges, but then also for feeding wildlife throughout the whole year, from early in spring when they start to flower through the summer when they start to turn into fruit, and right into the autumn when the fruit harvest is at its peak. So I hope you've enjoyed learning about some of the plants and the animals that we've talked about today. There's so much more to cover, so you might go and do a little bit of investigation yourselves. But for now, it's time to put some of what you've learned into practice. So I'm going to hand you over to Patrick. And thanks for joining me. And Patrick is going to do a little activity with you, connecting to what we've looked at today. So see you soon.
Hello, my name is Patrick, and I hear that you've been learning about a hedge banquet with Maeve. And now you have an opportunity to tell a story about all these wonderful characters in the hedge that benefit from that banquet, so that you can share it with other people. Right, who are the characters that you're going to be in your story? So we have got Bridie Bramblebush, we've got Bella Bumblebee, and we've got Ben Blackbird. Now we've heard that Bridie Bramblebush produces flowers, and this provides food for the bees. And so Bella actually takes that food that Bridie has given her, but it also allows Bella to pollinate Bridie's flowers so that they turn into fruits, which is amazing. So there's a mutual benefit here. The bees are benefiting and the Bramblebush is benefiting. And then Bridie, once her flowers are pollinated and she produces fruits, Ben comes along and he eats that fruit, which is delicious for him and gives him some nourishment. And Ben wouldn't be able to do that if Bella hadn't pollinated those flowers. And then Ben also helps Bridie because he spreads all her seed. So Bridie can have little children or little other bramble bushes popping up in other places. So let's go to the story. You've lots of options for this. If you're in a junior class, your teacher could maybe help you to describe the story to your friend. So you're just telling your story to a friend about all these different characters and thinking about what you've learned. Or perhaps your teacher can help you co-create a story about these wonderful characters in your book. Or lastly, maybe if you're in a senior class, you'd like to create a storyboard with these characters. And you can share that storyboard with junior classes. So, have some fun. Create a story which tells the tale of how Bridie Bramblebush, Bella Bumblebee and Ben Blackbird help each other. Because it's all about community. You've got lots of different options of how you can do this. And share your story with your family when you go home so they know how important that hedge banquet is and how all those different organisms help each other. And perhaps your teacher can take some of your stories and tweet them with the hashtag Climate Nature Summit so other schools can see what you have been getting up to. Have fun.
Hi folks, it's me, Maeve again here today, and we have one more activity that you might like to try together as a class. It is called the Web of Life, and it helps to demonstrate how everything in nature is connected. So what you'll need for this is a group of participants from about age 8, and this activity is also great all the way up to adults. So any age group is grand. You need a ball of string, and that needs to be at least 20 meters long, and approximately 15 labels or pictures. This depends on the size of your group. So each label or picture should be the name or the image of an animal or a plant or other landscape feature from an ecosystem. So today, for example, we will consider a woodland ecosystem in Ireland. So examples of what the labels or the pictures might have on them would be an oak tree, a spider, a bee, fly, a beetle, a bat, a robin, maybe a picture of a hawthorn tree, a blackbird, a bluebell, a squirrel, earthworm, a stream, soil, or rain. And they're all things that you would find normally in a woodland ecosystem in Ireland. So I'll explain to you how it works. To begin, participants stand in a circle facing each other, and each participant is given a label or a picture to stick on the front of their jumper or to hold, and they hold them facing into the group so that everybody else can see. So one participant, say for example the oak tree, holds the end of the string and then will hand the ball of the ball of string to the next participant of their choice, but they have to choose somebody that, or some creature or feature that is connected to them in some way by nature. So with this example, the oak tree might decide to pass the ball of string whilst holding the end of it. They'll pass the ball of string then to, for example, the spider. And they'll have to say something about the connection that they have with the spider. So the oak tree might say, well, the oak tree provides shelter in its branches for the spider to build a web. And now the spider, the participant with the spider label or picture is holding the ball of string, and they have to look around the group and decide what other feature or animal or plant would a spider link with in nature. So the spider might decide to pass the ball of string onto the fly, the person holding the fly, and the spider will hold on to a bit of the string and just pass the ball over, the ball of string. And they might say a sentence like, the spider gets its energy by feeding on the fly and by eating the fly. And so now we have the string going from the oak tree to the spider to the fly. And so now the fly, well, the person who's holding the fly will have to look around the group and decide how the fly is connected to some other creature or feature in the group. So this continues like this, with the ball slowly unraveling and being passed back and forth. And each participant has to hold a piece of the string. Remember to hold it taut so that the web can be built properly. And you have to keep making a statement. Remember that some elements of the group, so maybe the oak tree or the stream or the soil, might keep having connections, and that's okay. So the string can be passed back to the same person a few times, but they have to keep holding a new piece of string for every connection that they've made. When you're kind of finished, when everybody's been connected in, when everyone's linked in with a string, then somebody, the facilitator, will maybe place their hand gently on the middle of the string just to see how strong it is. And you can have a chat then around what it looks like and what's going on. But just then the next step might be that if you think something could happen to anything in the woodland. So say if we pick the oak tree and we say, well, what happens if somebody comes and chops down the oak tree to make wood, for wood for their fire? So if the oak tree is chopped down and removed, what happens to the rest of the web of the woodland? So you can ask the oak tree participant maybe to drop the string and see what happens and what it feels like. And then you can ask anybody who feels that they have a loose string to drop their string and see what happens to all the connections in the web and see who's affected when the oak tree is removed, see what other animals or plants or features are affected by that. So that's how it works. I hope that's clear, and I hope you have fun doing it and learn lots. And if you want a download of that activity and for more activity ideas, you can always go to the Green School's website, which is on your screen now. Okay, that's all for me. Thanks for joining again. Bye.